This story is shocking in its brutality and cynicism. A young woman was found brutally murdered in her home. In this video, we will tell you what really happened. Shauna Tiaffay was born on March 13, 1966, in Salt Lake City, Utah. She was an energetic and cheerful girl, full of life, a high school cheerleader surrounded by friends, with big plans for the future. After finishing school, she stayed in her home state for a while, working, but at the age of 29, she decided to radically change her life and moved to Las Vegas. The city attracted her with its fast-paced lifestyle, bright lights, and earning opportunities. At first, Shauna worked as a cosmetic saleswoman for luxury brands, but in 2001, her path led her to the Palms Casino. The establishment had just opened, but quickly became one of the most popular in Las Vegas. It was there that fate brought her together with George, the man who would later become her husband. Their romance developed rapidly. A year after they met, the couple welcomed their daughter Madison, and a few years later, they officially got married. At first glance, their life seemed perfect: a happy family, a stable income, and a cozy home. George worked as a firefighter, a profession that commanded respect. He was a caring father and husband, always striving to provide for his family. Shauna, on the other hand, worked as a waitress at a casino and earned a substantial income, over $100,000 a year, significantly exceeding her husband's earnings. However, in 2008, the financial crisis hit their family like a hurricane. George lost most of his savings, which he had invested in real estate. This was a blow he couldn't handle calmly. He changed, becoming nervous, irritable, and increasingly lashing out at his wife and daughter. Their relationship began to fall apart. Exhausted by constant arguments and tension, Shauna decided they needed to live separately and moved into her own apartment. The couple attempted to save their marriage by seeking help from a family therapist, but there was no improvement. Talks of divorce became more frequent. Then, something strange happened in Shauna's life that added to her worries. While she was at work, her apartment was burglarized. The thieves took several valuable items, including her wedding ring, but left behind something unusual: a pair of men's underwear while taking her bikini bottoms. The police conducted an investigation but found no leads. The incident remained a mystery, and at the time Shauna had no idea that it was part of a sinister plan. The morning of September 29, 2012, turned out to be fatal. George picked up 8-year-old Madison from her grandmother's house and drove to Shauna's apartment to collect their daughter's belongings, since they shared custody, and Madison was supposed to spend a few days with him. As they approached the apartment, they noticed that the garage door was wide open. Upon entering, they were met with a horrifying sight. Shauna lay on the floor, surrounded by blood. Little Madison witnessed this gruesome scene, an image that would haunt her forever. George immediately called the police, and the 911 operator instructed them to step outside and wait for the officers to arrive. Investigators arrived quickly and began examining the crime scene. They determined that Shauna had likely been attacked near the staircase on the second floor. The house was in chaos. Items were scattered, furniture was broken, indicating a violent struggle. Medical examiners initially suspected a gunshot wound as the cause of death, but the autopsy revealed otherwise. She had been brutally beaten with a heavy blunt object, likely a hammer. The injuries were horrific: multiple blows to her head and body, inflicted with extreme savagery. Neighbors provided the first clues. One recalled hearing loud noises between 3:30 and 4 a.m., but dismissed them, assuming Shauna had returned home from work. Another neighbor found her phone, documents, and makeup bag on a nearby street, suggesting that the killer had fled in haste. The police reconstructed the timeline of that night. Surveillance cameras at the casino and parking lot showed Shauna finishing her shift and calmly walking to her car. There were no signs of distress or danger. This led detectives to conclude that the killer had already been inside her apartment when she returned home. Naturally, the first suspect was George. The divorce, financial troubles, and his short temper, all of it worked against him. Shauna's friends told police about his constant jealousy and the frequent arguments that shook their home. However, George had an airtight alibi. He had been on a 12-hour shift at the fire department, which was confirmed by his colleagues and security footage. With no evidence against him, the police hit a dead end. Investigators revisited the burglary that had occurred 3 weeks earlier and started looking for connections between the two incidents. One theory was that the burglar had returned but failed to leave before Shauna arrived, leading to a struggle and her murder. However, Shauna's sister remained convinced that George was responsible. She knew about his aggression and suspected that his alibi was just a cover-up, but without proof, the police shifted their focus to other leads. A day after Shauna's body was discovered, the case took an unexpected turn. Her murder became the top story in local news, drawing public attention. A man contacted the police with information about a homeless individual known as Greyhound. He claimed that Greyhound had been bragging about killing a woman with a hammer and even laughed while describing the details. Since these specifics had not been released to the media, the police took the tip seriously. The witness directed them to a location near an Albertson store on the outskirts of the city, where detectives found and arrested Greyhound, whose real name was Noel Stevens. During the search, officers found drugs in his possession, giving them immediate grounds to take him into custody. Stevens was known for petty theft and drug possession, but murder didn't seem to fit his usual behavior. He denied any involvement, and the police were skeptical. Why would a homeless man, living on the other side of the city, kill Shauna? There was still money and valuables left in the apartment, making the motive unclear. However, a search of his tent, located in a desolate area outside the city, changed everything. Just yards from the tent, they found blood-stained pants and underwear. DNA testing confirmed the blood belonged to Shauna. Then, on Stevens' phone, they found a single contact, George Tiaffay's number. The connection between Stevens and George became the key to solving the case. It turned out that George had been friends with the homeless man for several years, hiring him for odd jobs around the house. Shauna had repeatedly complained to friends about Stevens' strange behavior and how he scared her, but George dismissed her concerns. The police then requested surveillance footage from the store where the hammer, the murder weapon, had been purchased. The footage showed George and Stevens buying the tool together. Faced with this evidence, Stevens broke down and confessed. He revealed that he had killed Shauna at George's request for a payment of $600. The crime had been planned for months. George bought Stevens dark clothing, gave him the keys to Shauna's apartment, and even orchestrated the burglary 3 weeks before the murder to mislead the police. On the night of the murder, Stevens broke into the house and waited for Shauna's return. When she went upstairs, he attacked her, delivering about 17 blows with the hammer. The weapon broke from the force of the blows, and Stevens buried the remains near his tent. Later, he led detectives to the spot. George was arrested, but he attempted to flee. After jumping into his pickup truck, he sped down the highway, crashed into a barrier, and went off the road. The police considered this a suicide attempt, as there were no skid marks. He was taken to the hospital with moderate injuries, and 2 days later, he was officially charged with murder. His reaction was cold. He requested a lawyer and asked for the opportunity to take a shower. Stevens made a full confession, avoiding the death penalty, and was sentenced to 42 years in prison. George's trial began in August 2015. He remained silent, allowing his defense to speak for him. The lawyer argued that Stevens acted alone and that the store records proved nothing. However, 87 phone calls between George and Stevens in September 2012, including 5 just before the murder, convinced the jury otherwise. The motive was identified as money. After the financial crisis, Shauna had become the primary breadwinner, and George feared losing everything in the divorce. He was counting on her life insurance after her death. The jury found him guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and sentenced him to life in prison, plus an additional 81 years. George filed an appeal on 107 pages, claiming that medication clouded his judgment and that past trauma had deprived him of control. The court dismissed the appeal in 2017, finding no grounds to doubt his sanity. Shauna Tiaffay's story is a tragedy, where love turned into betrayal and family became the stage for a cruel conspiracy. George, who seemed like a caring husband, turned out to be a monster, willing to destroy his wife for money and use their daughter as an alibi. Stevens, a petty criminal, became the tool in his hands, transforming a random connection into a deadly alliance. Madison, who lost both her mother and father, was left with her grandmother and aunt, carrying the burden of memories from that horrific morning. And that concludes our coverage of this tragic story. If you found this video informative or thought-provoking, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more updates on cases like these. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Feel free to share this video with your friends and give it a thumbs up if you found it valuable. Thank you for watching.